With round 2 looming in Valencia for the Champions of the Future Academy program for the Mini 60 category, the championship leader, Niccolò Perico, was heading into this weekend with high hopes and continued those high hopes after putting it on pole position in time qualifying.
Yeah, it was a good session. Why we just do push all the session. Just we do like the same time. So yeah, it was great.
However, the qualifying heats would be a different story, with Wynn Godschalk taking the first of the wins in qualifying heat 1, ahead of Lorenzo Zucchetto, with Perico finishing in 3rd place. Vicente Capela also having a good race, gained 1 place to finish ahead of Zayne Burgess, who round out the top 5 at the end of the first qualifying heat. Qualifying heat 2 would be a very different story though for some drivers. Wynn Godschalk would be another one of those drivers who would take another qualifying heat win, putting himself on pole position for the final. Lorenzo Zucchetto would also join him very strongly up at that sharp end, only 0.06 of a second behind him at the end. Zayne Burgess, Ava Lawrence and Aaron Mason rounded out the top 5 after Ava continued to impress with 10 places gained to finish in that 4th place. However, Niccolò Perico would end that second qualifying heat, retiring from the race. Going into that final then, it would be Wynn Godschalk, the leader of the overall classification and the under-10s as well, gaining 25 championship points and putting himself on pole position ahead of Lorenzo Zucchetto, Zayne Burgess, Vicente Capela and Teo Palfrane, who would round out the top 5 ahead of their Saturday final. Into the tram lines, lights are out, we are racing, and it's a good start for the entire field. Again, Ava Lawrence tucking to the inside there from the outside road to try and get the inside line, and has successfully done that as the whole field pushes their way through turn number 1 and 2 cleanly.
Jumping themselves up the order also is Aaron Mason. He is the biggest mover in the top 10. Started 16th, currently P9 is the 8-2-4. Vicente Capela is your fastest driver out there though, so it's Mason and Capela that are the two within this race that are really gunning for it so far. That lead pack then has turned into a lead pack of 4 drivers. It's America's Wynn Godschalk that leads from Zayne Burgess, Teo Palfrane and Vicente Capela. Capela has set that fastest lap, so watch him as he hooks onto the back of Palfrane as they head into sector number 3.
We're starting to see a little change there. That's Capela changing from Teo Palfrane. That is one overtake happening. Now that is behind the likes of Godschalk and Burgess, so they won't have seen that. So that's why they're not going defensive and not thinking. Niccolò Perico, who is there in P5, is still in the championship lead. And yes, Vicente Capela getting up into 2nd place. That's the first one. And now Godschalk's got to start to think, oh, hold on, you're not the driver who was behind me for most of it. There's 2 drivers out of this race. That's Yanis Oyana and Roslyn Heineke. Unfortunately, they're off at turn number 1. Marshall's on scene. Both drivers are okay, though.
Vicente Capela started 4th, currently 2nd, but is he going to go for that race lead? Yes, he does. Gets it done then. No time to even think about it. Wynn Godschalk was just caught out. Capela straightened that wheel in late and hard on the brakes and just slotted himself in. And crucially, there was no time lost, but Wynn Godschalk, he doesn't want to give it up because he's gone straight back in. He's taken the race lead back, and now Zayne Burgess is having a look for P2. Zayne Burgess now goes up the inside of Capela, takes advantage of that time lost when Wynn Godschalk took the overtake.
To the drivers across the line they go. It is Godschalk who leads the way, but squeezes Burgess onto that grass, and now Capela gets the switch over and sends it down the inside at turn number 1. That releases Godschalk, but don't fret, because that slipstream, that toe, will close that gap once more. Godschalk to the inside, Capela follows, Burgess tries to get the switch over, goes alongside, a little bit of contact between the 2 of them, but he manages to hold on to this one. But in the final chicane, is it going to be an almighty send? It won't be. Out of the final corner, it will be Wynn Godschalk across the line. The American wins the under-10 category and the overall Mini 60 category. It is Wynn Godschalk taking it beautifully across the line. There is your top 3, but with Wynn Godschalk and Vicente Capela, P1 and 2, Zayne Burgess rounds out 3rd.
Yeah, we were pushing until to the last 2 laps, and then we were fighting.
Sunday for the champions of the Future Academy program in the Mini 60 category at round 2 at the Valencia circuit. Kick-started time qualifying with the American Wynn Godschalk finding himself on pole position, clear by just under a tenth of a second from Niccolò Perico, the current championship leader going into the weekend. The qualifying heats, though, certainly kicked off some very exciting one, with fellow American Zayne Burgess claiming the honours in the first qualifying heat win, Ava Lawrence, who rounded out the top 5. Qualifying Heat 2 saw a different story as well. Niccolò Perico back on the top spot, taking the 50 intermediate classification points, finishing ahead of Wynn Godschalk, Ava Lawrence, Vicente Capela and Rivaan Preetham, who rounded out the top 5. Mentoring Karajkovic, who did have a good run in the second race, despite the fact he broke down in qualifying Heat 1. The mini classifications, though, going into the final would see Niccolò Perico on pole position, despite the fact that he only had a few points ahead of the rest of the field. Wynn Godschalk, Vicente Capela, Ava Lawrence and Aaron Mason would round out the rest of the top 5 ahead of their final on Sunday.
And here we go, almost as they are going to head into the tram lines, led by Niccolò Perico. Will they meet the lights and head out? Yes, they do. So it's Niccolò Perico that hugs that inside line, just looks over to his shoulder to gauge where Wynn Godschalk is on the road. Wynn then has to concede some places. He drops down to about 4th position on the road. They'll head into turns 3 and 4, but it's Niccolò Perico that's got a steady start, and that's Aaron Mason going up the inside. Aaron Mason has jumped into 2nd position, just capitalised off the drivers, going a little bit slower in front of him out of turn number 1, and has jumped up the order. I think he has lost that position, though, has now dropped down into 3rd.
That train behind will have a quicker momentum around this lap because they will get that benefit. With him on his own, he will just have to push through himself. Aaron Mason sends it down the inside, who he's brought along for company as well there. And Peruzzi's going to try and go for these moves here, and he does try and go for the move down the inside, but he slots back in behind and can't quite get that move done.
Aaron Mason has been doing a lot of work. Now I believe we've had a change for the lead. Has Godschalk made a move on Niccolò Perico? Yes, he has.
So actually, Perico and Godschalk are breaking away from Burgess and Capela. They are not fast enough to catch up to these two in the lead.
Is this the opportunity then for Perico to try and make something happen? Up the inside then of Wynn Godschalk. Is he going to make it stick? Wynn Godschalk tries to hang it round the outside. It's Perico then. Classic Niccolò Perico move. He has done it on this final lap of this final mini race.
He certainly has, but that final chicane is left, and it's going to be side by side once again. They both outbrake themselves off the track, and it's going to be a side-by-side to the line, and that's going to be one to talk about, but Godschalk's going to take it over the line by 1/100th of a second. Wynn Godschalk does take it across the line from Perico, and I was going to say if Perico took the win on that one, Godschalk would have had to have made the argument that he missed the chicanes. There are your top 3 then. Wynn Godschalk from Niccolò Perico, Vicente Capela finishing in 3rd place.
I feel really good. I thought I lost it in the last lap, but I tricked him in the last corner.